It's really quite something when a newspaper with roots deep in India's freedom struggle ends up, well, decades later, right in the middle of a huge legal storm. You mentioned the National Herald case, specifically this charge sheet that just dropped on April 15th.
Yeah, it's definitely caught a lot of attention.
And it names some very, very big names: Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, Sam Petroda, Suman Dubey. It really makes you step back and ask, what's actually going on here, beyond the
It
headlines?
absolutely does. We've looked through the details you sent over, and it's definitely not straightforward. There's history, there's law, there's politics, all tangled up.
Right.
So our goal today is really to try and, well, unpack it a bit, get to the core of what this case is all about.
Okay, so the National Herald itself, for anyone maybe not familiar, this wasn't just some local paper. Jawaharlal Nehru founded it way back in 1938.
Think about that timing, right in the heat of the independence movement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Associated Journals Limited, AJL, was the publisher, who was a voice, a voice for the freedom movement against the British. But then things changed, and by 2008, the newspaper actually stopped publishing.
And that's a really crucial point to grasp right away. This current legal fight, it's not really about the journalism the paper did or its editorial views back then.
Not at all. The focus is completely different now. It's all about the money, specifically the assets AJL owned.
Right. And the central accusation from the Enforcement Directorate, the ED, based on what you shared, it's pretty, well, startling.
It is.
They're basically saying that AJL's assets, valued at something like a massive Rs 2,000 crore,
2,000 crore.
were effectively taken over by another company, Young Indian Private Limited, for just Rs 50 lakh.
50 lakh. And get this, Young Indian is registered as a not-for-profit company, Section 8, I think?
That's right. And the main stakeholders in this not-for-profit, Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, they each hold a 38% stake.
Which is, a very significant controlling interest in any company, let alone one set up for charitable purposes.
And we shouldn't forget the others named in this recent charge sheet. Sam Petroda, people might know him from the tech world, long associated with Congress, and Suman Dubey, a veteran journalist.
So this charge sheet, filed April 15th in Delhi's Rouse Avenue Court, it accuses them of criminal conspiracy under the PMLA, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, 2002. That sounds serious.
It is serious. The PMLA targets the proceeds of crime, and they've cited specific sections 3, 44, 45, 70 with penalties in Section 4. Basically, these sections define the offense, outline trial procedures, punishments. It shows the ED isn't taking this lightly.
And there's a court date coming up soon, right? April 20th.
Yes, that's the next key date. The court has to decide whether to take cognizance of the ED's complaint.
Cognizance, meaning?
Meaning, will the court formally accept the charges and agree there's enough preliminary material to actually proceed towards a potential trial? It's a critical first hurdle for the prosecution.
Okay, so let's try and simplify this money laundering accusation. What does the ED actually claim happened here?
Well, the argument seems to be that Young Indian got control of AJL's very valuable real estate. We're talking prime spots in Delhi, Mumbai, Lucknow.
The Herald House building in Delhi, for instance.
Exactly. Got control of all that for the 50 lakh figure we mentioned. And then the ED alleges Young Indian started generating income from these properties through
Right.
things like donations, apparently Rs 18 crore worth, rent collected about Rs 38 crore, and even advertising revenue, another Rs 29 crore. The ED seems to be labeling this income as proceeds of crime.
Ah, I see. So the acquisition was allegedly improper, and then the income generated from those improperly acquired assets is the laundered money.
That appears to be the crux of the ED's argument, yeah.
Yeah.
That sequence. Questionable takeover, followed by generating financial benefits from those assets. But, this whole thing didn't just pop up last week.
No, definitely not. This has history. You have to go back to, what, 2014?
That's right. 2014 is when Subramanian Swamy, the BJP leader, filed a private complaint.
And what was his basic point then?
His core argument was that Young Indian wasn't really a charity venture, but essentially a shell company, a front, set up specifically to, well, grab AJL's valuable assets on the cheap.
And the court took it seriously, even back then.
It seems so. The court took notice of Swamy's complaint in June 2014, so this has been bubbling under the surface for a long time. The ED formally started its own PMLA investigation much later, around 2021.
Okay, so Swamy's argument revolved around a debt, didn't it? Something AJL owed the Congress Party.
Exactly. By 2010, AJL apparently owed the Congress Party a hefty sum Rs 90.21 crore. A lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, instead of AJL paying that back, the allegation is the Congress Party basically assigned or transferred that entire debt to Young Indian
For how much?
for the same Rs 50 lakh figure.
Right.
And according to Swamy, and now seemingly the ED, this debt assignment effectively gave Young Indian 99% ownership of AJL.
And therefore, control of all its valuable properties.
Precisely. That's the mechanism they're pointing to.
It does sound like a complex financial arrangement. And the ED hasn't just been like shuffling papers. They've taken action.
Oh, absolutely. We saw them question Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi back in 2022. That caused quite a stir politically.
Understandably.
And more recently, they've made a big move essentially seizing AJL assets they value at around Rs 661 crore.
So less than the 2,000 crore initial estimate, but still a huge amount.
Yeah.
Which properties are we talking about?
Herald House in Delhi, that property in Bandra in Mumbai, and a building in Lucknow. The ED claims these specific assets were used to generate those alleged illicit funds.
So seizing them is a major step. It signals the ED feels strongly about their case.
It certainly does. It escalates things significantly. But of course, there's a completely different side to this story.
The Congress Party's defense.
Yes.
How are they responding?
Very strongly. They're calling the whole investigation petty vendetta, pure politics. They've even labeled the ED, quite pointedly, as a coalition partner of the BJP government.
Wow. Strong words.
And Jairam Ramesh, a senior Congress leader, called the asset seizure itself a state-sponsored crime. So they're not holding back.
And what's the core of their legal argument, their defense against the money laundering charge?
It hinges on Young Indian's status. They consistently argue it's a Section 8 not-for-profit company established for charity.
So no profit motive.
Exactly. They argue that because it's not-for-profit and because what happened was essentially just a transfer of shares, AJL shares, moving under Young Indian's control via the debt assignment, no actual money laundering could have occurred. They're saying no personal financial profit was made by the individuals involved.
So it's a clash between the ED saying, look at the value obtained for a tiny sum and the income generated, versus Congress saying, look at the corporate structure and lack of personal enrichment.
That's a good way to put it. It raises really complex questions about how you define money laundering, especially when a not-for-profit structure is involved, and when assets acquired potentially below market value start generating income. Does the income become tainted? That's what the courts will have to grapple with.
And it's worth remembering, isn't it, that this investigation has been challenged before?
It has. The accused parties have gone to higher courts, like the Delhi High Court and even the Supreme Court, trying to stop the probe.
But the courts allowed it to continue.
Yes, the courts, up to this point, have largely upheld the ED's right to investigate. They haven't quashed the proceedings. That doesn't mean the charges are proven, of course, but it does mean the courts found sufficient legal grounds for the investigation itself to proceed.
Right, an important distinction. Okay, so if we were to boil it down, what are the absolute key questions our listeners should keep in mind as this unfolds?
Well, I think there are a few big ones. First, the acquisition itself. Was it fair? Did Young Indian get assets worth potentially Rs 2,000 crore for just 50 lakh through legitimate means?
That's question one. What else?
Second, the money laundering aspect, especially given Young Indian's not-for-profit claim. Can the ED make that charge stick? How does the law interpret generating income from assets acquired in this manner by such an entity?
And the elephant in the room.
The political angle, absolutely. Is this investigation driven by genuine financial concerns, or is it, as Congress claims, politically motivated persecution targeting opposition leaders? That question hangs over everything.
It really does. And maybe to understand the weight of it all, we should just briefly touch on the National Herald's own history again.
It's important context, definitely.
I mean, back in the 40s, it was such a significant voice for independence that the British actually banned it for a few years. Nehru called its editor a fighting editor. It had real clout.
And later, especially during Indira Gandhi's time, it was seen by many as her government's mouthpiece.
Right. But then, post-emergency, things started to slide. Circulation dropped, there were financial issues, talk of mismanagement, leading eventually to its closure in 2008.
But crucially, while the presses stopped, the real estate didn't vanish.
Exactly. Those valuable properties remained. And it's that contrast, isn't it? This paper with such a historical legacy now caught up in a controversy about property and finance.
It adds another layer of complexity and perhaps public interest.
Okay, quick recap of the key players again, just to keep them straight.
Sure. Sonia Gandhi, Congress stalwart, 38% stake in Young Indian. Rahul Gandhi, leader of opposition, also 38%.
Then Sam Petroda, tech figure, Congress loyalist, Suman Dubey, veteran journalist, both also named in the ED charge sheet.
And on the other side, Subramanian Swamy, the BJP leader who filed the original complaint that started it all.
And the Enforcement Directorate, the agency driving the current PMLA case.
Right. So all eyes on April 25th at the Rouse Avenue Court.
That's the immediate focus, the decision on taking cognizance. If the court says yes, we're likely looking at the start of a potentially long and complicated trial under the PMLA.
And proving intent in money laundering cases, that's never easy, is it?
Yeah.
No, it's often the biggest challenge for the prosecution. Proving that the actions were taken knowing they were part of laundering proceeds of crime.
So when we think about why this matters, why people should care, it touches on some pretty big themes.
Definitely. Trust in public figures, in institutions, the handling of assets linked to, well, a piece of national history, and of course the huge sums of money involved. That Rs 2,000 crore figure keeps coming up.
It really puts a spotlight on accountability, doesn't it? Especially where politics, history, and large amounts of money intersect.
Precisely. Whatever the final legal verdicts, the case itself forces a conversation about these things.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear the National Herald story is, well, it's a saga. It stretches from India's past right into today's most contentious legal and political arenas.
And that court date, April 25th, it really could be a major fork in the road for this case, impacting the individuals involved and maybe even the wider political climate.
We're left with these two starkly different narratives, aren't we? The ED alleging serious financial wrongdoing.
Versus the Congress Party insisting it's all political vendetta.
Yeah. And I suppose, at the end of the day, whether this case eventually exposes real misconduct or just political gamesmanship, it certainly throws a harsh light on that tricky nexus of money, power, history, and politics in India today. Something for everyone to think about well beyond the courtroom.